first time it happened, I thought I'd simply misheard the address, because nobody requests a pickup at a house that burned to the ground 11 years before I even got my driver's license. My name is Jenna Hollies, and I drive overnight rideshare through a stretch of rural highway outside a town most people only pass through on their way somewhere else. I took the job the way most people take a job like that. Because the hours worked around a day shift, I couldn't quit yet. And because the app doesn't ask questions about why a 26-year-old woman wants to spend her nights alone in a car on empty roads instead of sleeping like a reasonable person. I told myself I liked the quiet. For the first few months, I actually did. The pattern started small enough that I didn't notice it as a pattern at first. A ride request would come in at exactly 12:17 in the morning, never a minute earlier or later, always from the same general stretch of road out, past the old highway split. A section everyone in town still calls Millbrook, even though the county renamed it decades ago, after some accident nobody likes to talk about in detail. I'd pick up a single passenger standing at the edge of the road with no house or driveway anywhere nearby, and they'd give me a destination, and the ride would be quiet, almost peaceful, right up until the very end, when they'd say something that had no business coming out of a stranger's mouth. The first one was an older man in a soaked coat on a night that hadn't seen any rain. He asked me to take him to a house on Cedar Lane, and about 2 minutes before we got there, he turned to look at me directly for the first time the entire ride, and said, quiet and almost apologetic, "You still keep that photograph of your mother in the visor, don't you? The one from before she left." "I do keep that photograph there. I have never told a single soul about it, not my closest friend, not anyone I've dated, because it isn't the kind of detail you bring up in casual conversation." I didn't answer him. I just drove faster than I probably should have, and when I pulled up outside the address he'd given me, the house was dark, and the porch light was busted, and by the time I turned around from checking the app to confirm the drop-off, the back seat was empty, and the door hadn't opened. I told myself I'd imagined the whole exchange. The way you tell yourself lots of things after midnight when you're running on too little sleep and too much coffee. I stopped believing that excuse 3 weeks later, when a young woman got into my car at 12:17 exactly, gave me an address out past Millbrook that the app's map couldn't even locate, and spent the entire ride humming a lullaby my own grandmother used to sing to me. One I have never heard another living person sing in my entire life. Word for word, note for note, right up until the moment I pulled the car over out of pure reflexive fear and turned around to find the seat empty again. After that, I started keeping a notebook in the glove box. The way you keep a log of anything you're afraid might genuinely be happening to your own mind. Every ride that started at 12:17, every impossible address, every detail a stranger had no reasonable way of knowing about me. The list grew longer than I wanted it to, and every single ride, without exception, ended the exact same way, with the passenger vanishing from a locked, moving car sometime in the final stretch before arrival. Always right around a bridge, crossing the old creek bed on the edge of town. The one everybody still calls the Millbrook Bridge, even though it technically belongs to a different road entirely now. I finally went looking through the newspaper archive at the public library on one of my days off, mostly because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my grip on reality, and what I found there did the opposite of reassure me. 31 years earlier, on a night in early autumn, a car carrying 5 people had gone off the old Millbrook overpass in weather nobody could later explain, since the roads had been clear and dry, and all 5 passengers had died. The driver, according to the article, had never been positively identified. He'd been found separately from the wreck, some distance down the embankment, and the paper noted, almost as an aside, that investigators at the time couldn't determine with certainty whether he'd actually been in the car at all, since none of the surviving family members recognized him, and no missing persons report ever matched his description. I recognized 2 of the 5 victims' names immediately, because I had already written their descriptions in my glovebox notebook weeks earlier, thinking they were simply strange, ordinary passengers. I didn't stop driving after that. I want to be honest about why, because it wasn't bravery, and it wasn't curiosity either. Not really. It was that once I understood what I was actually picking up out on that stretch of road every so often, I couldn't make myself abandon them halfway through whatever they were still trying to finish. Each of them, I came to believe, was still trying to complete the exact ride they never got to finish 31 years ago, over and over, with whichever driver happened to be working that stretch of road when the hour came around again. And something in me, some stubborn, foolish part of my nature, decided that the least I could do was actually get them where they were going instead of leaving them stranded in the back seat of a stopped car on the side of an empty highway. I want to tell you that decision cost me nothing, but that would be a lie, because the more rides I completed, the more I started noticing something underneath the pattern that I hadn't let myself think about directly. Every single passenger who vanished did so a short distance before we actually reached the address they'd given me. Not one of them had ever made it the entire way. And on the night everything changed, I finally understood why. It was the anniversary. I hadn't marked the date on any calendar, but the moment my phone buzzed at exactly 12:17 with a new ride request from the Millbrook split, some cold, certain part of me already knew, before I even picked up the passenger, that this ride was going to be different from all the others. He was younger than the others had been, mid-30s maybe, dressed in clothes that didn't quite match any decade cleanly, sitting very still in the back seat the moment he got in, watching me in the rearview mirror with an attention that felt entirely unlike the quiet, distracted sorrow of every other passenger I'd carried. He gave me an address on the far side of the Millbrook Bridge, in the actual town proper, somewhere with real streetlights and real people still awake behind real windows. And something about the specificity of that destination, so different from the vague, half-remembered addresses the others had given, made the hair on my arms rise before he'd even finished speaking. "Been very generous with your time," he said, about halfway through the ride, his voice pleasant in a way that didn't match the stillness of his face. "Getting all those people where they needed to go. It's kind of you. Rare, honestly, this day and age. Someone willing to just drive a stranger exactly where they ask, no questions." "That's the job," I said, keeping my eyes on the road, keeping my voice as flat and ordinary as I could manage. "It really is," he agreed, and there was something underneath his tone now, something almost hungry, carefully leashed. "Do you know, in 31 years, nobody's ever actually gotten me all the way there. Isn't that strange? Every single driver, every single time, loses their nerve right around the bridge. Something about that stretch makes people suddenly remember they left the stove on, or their phone's about to die, or they just suddenly feel like pulling over for no reason at all. I've started to wonder if you might be the one who finally does it." We came up on the bridge, and every instinct in my body was screaming at me to keep driving exactly the way he wanted, to just finish the ride the way I'd finished every other ride that summer, because that had always worked before, that had always been the kind thing to do. But every other passenger before him had gone quiet with grief in that final stretch, had gotten smaller somehow, sadder, resigned. He was doing the opposite. He was leaning forward slightly in the mirror, watching the bridge approach with an eagerness that had nothing sorrowful in it at all. And I understood, all at once, cold and certain, that I was not looking at a passenger who had died in that crash 31 years ago. I was looking at whatever had caused it. I stopped the car in the middle of the bridge, engine still running, and I did not say the words I had said to every other passenger before him. I did not tell him we'd arrived. I did not open the doors. I just sat there, hands locked on the wheel, and told him, as steadily as I could manage, that I wasn't taking him any further tonight. His pleasant expression didn't crack exactly, but something underneath it did. Some careful mask slipping half an inch to reveal the shape of what was actually sitting in the mirror, watching me with an attention far older and far less patient than anything human. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, and his voice had lost all its earlier warmth entirely. "I only need to cross once, just once, all the way to a real town, with a real living person to carry me. After that, I'm not stuck out here anymore. I could give you anything you want in exchange. I could give you back every single year that road already took from you every time you drive it. I'm not driving you the rest of the way," I said again, and I made myself say his passengers' names instead. The two I'd recognized from the newspaper article. Quietly, deliberately, the way you say a name when you want someone to remember they were a person, and not simply a debt owed to something older than they were. Whatever was sitting behind me went very still, and then, without any door ever opening, without any sound at all, the back seat was simply empty again, the way it always was at the end of every other ride. Except this time, I sat there afterward for a long time before I trusted myself to drive the rest of the way across that bridge alone. I still work the overnight shift. I haven't been able to make myself quit, partly because the money's still good, and partly because some stubborn, exhausted part of me still believes there might be one or two more names left out there on that stretch of road who deserve an actual ending to a ride they never got to finish, honestly. But I've noticed something new since that night that I haven't written down in the glovebox notebook yet. Something I'm not entirely sure I want to admit out loud, even to myself. My dashboard clock has started sticking on 12:17 sometimes, for no reason at all, even in broad daylight, even when I'm nowhere near Millbrook Road. And every so often, when it does, I catch myself glancing in the rearview mirror before I can stop myself, just to make sure the back seat is still as empty as it's supposed to be.